You
Fair.
may have your own reasons, and those reasons may be emotional or due to some past trauma or whatever it is. And honestly, it's not my business unless you feel like telling me.
Sure.
That's not
No,
the
no.
reason I'm putting there. The reason I'm putting it there, and this is very practical, really. It's both, I think, granting compassionate space without making someone touch an X card and tell us their trauma.
Right. Exactly.
Instead, we agree at the table that this is the genre we're doing, and the genre we're doing is not going to explore the depths of addiction.
Hmm.
In this genre, drugs are just a color scene.
Right. I get all that, but I'm not sure why we're talking about it. That's not really what I'm driving at. What I'm talking about is not the what triggerish content. I'm talking just about the knowledge that somebody has that when they play, they are being taken seriously, and they are not going to be patronized by the showrunner by having everything work out.
Right, and that's
That's
where
what
my
I'm getting
jumping
at.
off point was to the trigger warnings,
Yeah,
and
I
I
get. I
realize that
see
that
the
can be read
bridge.
both ways. Because
Yeah.
on one hand, it does feel like patronizing. It depends on your point of view about trigger warnings. Um, I'm trying to use them in a practical way,
Yeah.
but it's also about it's not the trigger warnings themselves, but the fact that they exist in the game demonstrates that this game is not merely a
Right.
physics simulator,
Right.
right?
Right.
I mean, quite
or
clearly,
or
just by
or a
being there.
genre simulator for that matter.
Yeah.
In the sense of a widget, right, spitting out the genre because we poke a button. And so I do see the bridge to the trigger warning topic from what we were talking about. But again, fascinating as it is, that is something that you will use your own aesthetics and experience to articulate to the people reading your game. And I don't probably need to help you with it. Um, the issue I want to focus on is how are you okay, here's the thing. I'm going by what Sam suggests, which I think is absolutely valid. Play something genuine, maybe without a whole bunch of extra subroutines and ifs and ands and buts in terms of the system, right? So just the kind of the basic system itself is genuinely there, but you play it genuinely. You play it like the way it's supposed to be played. You don't play a toddler version, and you don't play this puffy thing in which we're only pretending to play, right? So you get to roll dice and stuff like that, but really, I've got it covered. We're gonna, we're going to, we're gonna. I got it covered. It's basically me just entertaining you with an episode.
I'm,
Um,
I'm trying to think of a good metaphor because I know, and we're trying to describe something that no one's done. That's why I've come to you because I've never seen anyone do this, but I feel like it's approachable.
mhm, I agree.
Imagine a limited scenario, not I forget the city of whatever the hell he called it, the scenario that he released just after AW to show you a location to run AW in. It was a city of something, but not like that, but like something much more limited with one front only. Okay,
Mhm.
that's and so we're not talking about baby steps, but we're kind of
Just with
taking the GM's,
manageable content.
just
Yeah,
giving the
yeah,
GM like you're
yeah.
only going to have to deal with one front
Hmm.
in this scenario. Um, but and maybe there's a second scenario where we introduce a second front,
Hmm.
and then that's it, baby. Your scaffolding is done.
Right. Now, I love this idea, and I failed at it because it was 25 years ago and I didn't have the right vocabulary or quite yet the skills when I put in that one scenario in Sorcerer, which is disastrous. It's an
Oh,
excellent text to read with my annotations to see why it doesn't work for that purpose,
okay.
right? But on the other hand,
Yeah, I look forward to 20 years from now. I'm writing the annotated version where
yeah,
everything gets
exactly, and
left out.
saying,
Yeah.
and I fucked this part up completely, right? Seriously. Um, so the important point here is that you have an eye now on the things that are important to teach. If you have a thing to play and it is played honestly, and there's not too much to kind of like, oh, and then this subroutine for the hang gliders, is over here. Not too much. I mean, maybe if it crops up, you can grab it, whatever. But if the people are into it, then they'll learn the hang gliders. How do we do the hang gliders? Okay, here's how we do it.
Well, they
They'll do
will.
it,
But
right?
honestly, I mean, like
Yeah,
I said in the chase thread
right. Same thing,
on your
right?
forum, okay, I, I've been doing. I can do this in my sleep, man. I know
Yeah,
the Harmon Circle backwards and forwards, and and I had players that really know me well, and we vibe, and everything is good,
right.
right? But you know what? 3 players, all of whom are colorful individuals, maintaining a car race for an hour, fucking exhausting. It was a
Yeah,
lot of work.
yeah,
Okay, even if you know
right.
what you're doing,
Good enough. But let's go ahead then and say we're going to have this manageable,
all I'm saying is you don't,
right?
yeah, you don't
This
throw somebody that kind of scenario right
right,
off the bat.
exactly. So what then either you give one or give one as an example and then sort of the principles of making one and
Mhm,
say just do that, but for God's sake don't take care of them in terms of outcomes. We don't know how
mhm,
this is going to turn out and it will
mhm,
be okay. There's enough to work on the psychic connection, not in terms of of knowing what that person wants. I'm going to give them what they want, right? Just in terms of genuine human contact. If you say this, well, then this is how where my mind goes about how that interfaces with everything going on. My guy says, what? And pulls his gun, right? That's your sense
right, right.
of what
And
would
I know
happen,
that you have
right?
issues with the writer's room metaphor, but this is one of the reasons that I use the metaphor, and I say in the book, I think it may even be in micro, it's more important for the GM to remember this metaphor than it is for the players.
Right.
The reason is because these are not just pawns in your fucking
Mm-hmm.
thing. You're trying to elicit the writer in them.
Mm-hmm. I completely get that, and please bear in mind that I'm not telling you how to write it.
Oh,
That's
sure,
right.
sure,
Okay,
sure.
so but
Again,
yes,
it's
I
one of
see
those
your point
things
about
where
that.
I hope that whether or not I mean, if you could choose a better word, great. But the angle of
Right.
what means better,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
From my mind is writer's room is a metaphor, especially when I back it up with this story of the showrunner and how that works. That like everyone can get really quickly, and it's not the word player. It's a word that gives you a whole lot more
Right.
agency than the word player.
Right. I get all of that, but again, let's the fact that you've referenced this set of concepts and I've agreed with you that it is dovetailing with what I'm talking about, and that I think that this exchange illustrates that your mind is now thinking about how to, okay, I need to teach this. All of this is great. All
I
this
think
is good.
I think my last two footnotes have basically been attempts to show how really the game does suggest that in its own verbiage, but I suppose you kind of have to already know that in order to read that verbiage in the proper way.
So they're right. In which case, the only way, and this is why the learning through doing is so important.
Hmm.
I mean, this is one of the reasons why I can say blue in the face, this game is about making stories, making fiction, and some asshole's going to sit down there and is going to railroad a bunch of people through his little canned scenario and say that he did it, right? Because
I
you
don't think it's in
can't,
the section
right?
I gave you, but there is a
No,
section in the back
right,
half of the book where I talk about the fact that look, if you're doing this right, I don't say it like this, but basically I say if you're doing this right, you will find that your typical Call of Cthulhu scenario, an
yeah,
investigative
right,
bottleneck or a
right.
railroad line dot to
Mhm.
dot, uh, core will break it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not going to work.
exactly. No, I think that's a really good idea to have articulated here.
Yeah.
And I know the feeling quite well. What I'm trying to say is that you can't guarantee that any particular phraseology is immune to the precise reverse reading.
Okay.
Okay, you can't guarantee it. There's no way somebody said.
That's
I mean,
true.
it's
I
when
live in
right.
America, man. You
Mm-hmm.
don't have to drive
There,
it home any
right,
further.
exactly. So the issue here, therefore, is to say, look, I can't guarantee that. What I can do is say it in the most pragmatic way, and pragmatic in this case is Vygotsky. Fucking do it and do it honestly. Yes, there's scaffolding there, but you are doing the thing, and
Yeah.
you're not gonna. When I talk about patronizing, I mean treating anybody that what they do something, then I reach in and do it for them, right? So that it you know, I might help, but I cannot take over. Um, and that there is nothing terrible about the way that it's going to turn out. There's no failing the lesson, particularly, unless it's something they just don't want to do. If it's really something they don't want to do, then they better find out now.
Sure.
And that's another part of it too, is that this huh, this notion that the game can be, and I'm not talking about you, but there is a notion out there that a game system should be customizable to every imaginable purpose, to every imaginable lack of play, engagement, etc. I know that's not where you're coming from because of your focus on the psychic content and connections and things. I know that's not where you're coming from, but
Yeah,
let's
although
make sure,
I am
right?
trying to be, I am though trying to be, genre agnostic, definitely,
Right,
world agnostic,
which is fine,
sure,
right?
and to a degree, I mean, you can't run a Call of Cthulhu scenario in core. It's just
Right,
not.
there
It's
you
going to
go.
break it.
That's what I mean.
But to a degree, the depth of no, the the limit of the Harper line
Right.
is is
All of those things are better as dials.
settable.
Yeah. All of
Yeah,
those
it's a
things are
dial. Yeah, yeah.
better as dials rather than, I mean, all of those things work really nicely as dials, and that's great because that's where this business of you are empowering, like we were talking about, you are empowering the person to fly away with core and to do it well, right? And so maybe they're going to take a while to do it well, but they are embarked. And I think that's a big part of it too, is to say, what's your goal with this text? The best you can do is to help people embark,
Mm-hmm,
to get going,
mm-hmm.
and they will develop they'll spin the dials, sure, those are fairly easy to perceive and understand, but they will develop their own sense of expression and some of those other variables that we talked about, like precise authorities over backstory and stuff like that. They will get better at learning to mesh with the people at the table about how to do that for this game. And I think that is where we're aiming at as a teaching goal, is to have people embarked on a with a certain degree of clarity, but also of enthusiasm. And you're not going to have that enthusiasm unless you see the GM is just another learner in this regard, right? The GM, you're writing for the GM to learn. You are saying, how what do? You have to play this honestly. You're the one who's learning here, just like they are. You are the one who is going to say, oh fuck, I didn't bring it around to the proper climactic moment. We did have a climactic moment, and my investment in it, the what I did contributed to that, but that was just, and they'll say something like, but it was organic, or they'll say something like, but it just happened. Of course it's not just organic, and no, it didn't just happen. They did do it, they just didn't do it by contriving it.
Right. Now, you want to talk about sounding woo woo? I sound really woo woo for a second,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of my approach is, and I found this out after, but I'm piecing it together as I as I study Milton Erickson and LP, and I'm discovering more and more overlap all the time between the artful performance of the active GMing and the active conversational hypnosis. There's a lot there. And especially since what I'm doing is focused on affect. Milton Erickson talks about hypnosis as a journey in which the hypnotist is the guide who opens the door, but the place that you're going is actually inside the subject. It's the subject who's leading. All you're doing is opening the door. What's going to really happen is an exploration of the interior landscape of that person, not of me.
In
And everything
Go
I
ahead.
can do to strengthen that, when they begin speaking, when I hear an emotional tone, when I sense a significant symbol. He doesn't quite say it this way, but basically Erickson says yes and.
Mm-hmm.
He says, if you watch Erickson hypnotizing people, he's constantly going, that's right.
Mhm.
That's right. And the other person is just like, they're just kind of fantasizing or loose association, you know? They just, and then they say something comes out of their mouth just kind of like spuriously. And like a good GM, he goes, that's right. And where is that pointing?
Now, this, I think, is valuable thought from the perspective of your interior processing of these things. The question is, how useful is this reference for explanation? I'm going to suggest that all of these be reserved in for what you might think of as your back end appendix. I'm not talking about the
Mm-hmm.
publication. I mean, conceptually, it's your back end appendix
Mm-hmm.
because just like the word story, the word hypnosis and hypnotist is not going to be perceived in the way that you just described.
Sure.
Right. So therefore, it may not be, regardless of the accuracy and your intellectual recognition, very satisfying intellectual recognition of commonalities of thought and practice.
Yeah, yeah.
There
Oh,
are things,
sure.
yeah, you know that using the word hypnosis in your pedagogy is counterproductive.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Although, I do want to mention it in the appendix and maybe just tap on it a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. But you know, the phraseology that I use when I'm talking to other GMs who aren't my closest friends and know all about my body of theory and how weird I am, I use the word experientialist. I
Mm-hmm.
say I'm an experientialist narrative. Well, what does that mean? That means that my primary goal is affect, and that means that even though I use the Harmon Circle, at any point in the game, if we get to a point where it's a choice between following your emotional register or following my Harmon Circle, fuck the Harmon
Right, exactly.
Circle.
No, you're basically you're writing a new one in front of my eyes. You know, that's what's
Yeah.
happening. So I totally get that. Now I think that this conversation has probably got where it needs to get. I know that okay, I really wanted to focus on the idea that little separate drill exercises, right? Little training separate things, attractive as they may seem, are actually inferior to really doing a very honest version of actually doing it that's in a manageable space, in a
Yeah,
manageable
yeah, yeah.
field. And that
I
is
hear
very
that.
powerful. And that to punch into those things about the psychic content, punch into especially those things about honoring the system, whatever it may be, honoring its constraints, and so that the people playing see that what they do turns out things are different because they were that person in the chair, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's huge. By the way, that's what I call agency. The extent of authority over a fictional content, I don't call that agency at all. That's just an interesting technique variation. When I say agency, I mean that when you play, the fact that you played means things turned out differently from if somebody else played. And when I say turned out, I don't mean just how they were described. I mean things turned out differently, and that means if you
I
roll
love that.
badly, right? I
Yeah,
mean
yeah.
that's, and also remember, failing and having limited options actually reveals more of yourself a lot of the time than having lots of options. How do
Right.
you play your character when your character takes that hit and loses the next action? What do they
For
do
sure.
when they get their action back? This is you, right? This is a big deal. That's the agency I'm interested in, and
I hear
that's
you.
why powerful system actually improves agency,
Mm-hmm.
right? So system getting out of the way and all that kind of stuff. Fuck that noise. I don't use that phrase at all. So this is, I think,
Okay.
yeah.
But I think that because of that safety net thing, if I explain a little bit about the Harmon Circle,
Mhm.
uh, you know, you can be a wussy. Cork can let you GM like the little wuss.
Right,
As long as you're not trying to run some kind of bottlenecky thing,
right.
then
Yeah, no, and
uh
and I love playing the wussy GM, by the way, because again, sure, we'll get a Harmon Circle, but it'll just spin off of who knows where, how
yeah.
big it is, or where it's rolling, because it's what they come up with. It's what they choose to do. So I really think we're on the right track here. Now you know what to teach.
Ish.
Closer, a lot
Ish.
closer, I
I'm
think.
a lot closer.
Yeah,
I'm kinda getting schematic diagrams in my head with that's
beautiful.
how I think.
We got to, you, me both. We got to close because there is a point where after a certain amount of interaction, it's much better for the brain to do its job, right? And
I hear
the
you.
sketches to occur without me anywhere near you, right?
Sure.
So I think maybe one more session to do that system talk stuff that I mentioned earlier,
Okay.
and then we'll review and see where we're at. How you feel about the whole thing? So,
Awesome.
thanks a lot, Todd. I'll talk to you later on.
Thank you,
Yeah.
sir. We'll see you.